Good afternoon, everybody. Today I wanted to do a case study. We periodically do these videos where we talk about specific client cases to explain, what the process was, what it entails, and it also helps our potential new clients to relate better with, the whole process and understand, where there's possible pitfalls and understand also where there are opportunities, because I think sometimes people don't always clearly understand what's required for a successful green card application and what's not necessarily required. We try to separate the myths from the facts and show that we're dealing with real life people that maybe not be extraordinarily talented, but they're talented enough, for example, to acquire a green card. So today I wanted to talk about one of our EB-1A clients, and this is very relevant when talking about talented people because EB-1A, it's a so-called genius visa, but I wouldn't say you really don't need to be a genius. It's sufficient if you're just very talented and you have recognized abilities in your sector or area of endeavor and what you're involved in. So this particular client, he has an EU passport, but it's from a Far East, an Eastern European country. It's not, France, Germany, stuff like that. He is a very successful IT entrepreneur. He's had a very successful IT business that's been based out of Eastern Europe for a while. A lot of his clients are in Western Europe or the US. And based on this general business endeavor, we were able to successfully get an EB-1A for him, even without an RFE. And in this particular case, we were under a bit of a risk. His oldest child was about to turn 21. And as you obviously know, once you turn 21, the child is not able to accompany you. So the child was turning 21 later this year in 2026. So we were under a bit of a time pressure to get everything done and filed before his birthday. The client had actually considered many other immigrant options, and including EB-5. And EB-5 was probably, at one point it was maybe his plan A, and then it became his plan B, because not that there's anything wrong with EB-5, but it does require a commitment of sizable capital, $800,000, which he would have had to pull out of his business, his IT software business. And if possible, of course, if you don't have to take money out of your business and invest it in a US project, most people would prefer alternative options. And over the course of time and discussing the strategy with him, we said we thought he'd have a good chance of doing the EB-1A. And so at that point, the EB-1A became the plan A, because EB-1A, you have premium processing within 15 days, so you can get an answer very quickly, much faster than with the EB-5. You don't have to freeze up $800,000 of your capital for the pendency of the investment with an EB-5. And so he thought, let's give it a shot with EB-1A. If that doesn't work out, then we could go with the EB-5. So in his case, and this is so typical with other EB-1A clients, he did not meet all of the minimum criteria when he first came to us. As you know, you have to satisfy at least 3 of the categories for the EB-1A. And I'll be honest, very few people meet those 3 categories on the first time we meet with them. Maybe a strong candidate might have 2 categories that they cover, maybe possibly 3, but we might have to work on them. So again, you shouldn't be discouraged if you don't meet 3 of those criteria when you first approach an immigration attorney. And in fact, what we worked with him on was we worked on developing his evidentiary base, the other evidence that he'd have for the other criteria over the course of the time. And that's why we were kind of on a tight deadline, because we had to build up his case on some of these other criteria, while at the same time being cognizant of the 21 birthday that was coming up for his son. But in order to meet the qualifications, for example, we worked with a PR agency to help publish articles about the work that he and his company had done and how that reflected on his abilities as an IT specialist and executive. For the most part, his petition was focused on his extraordinary abilities in the area of technology entrepreneurship. So kind of as a startup wizard who had built up a very successful company in the high-tech area, and we were focusing on his entrepreneurial skills as an executive and technology expert in the IT field. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of inquiries and a lot of clients in this area. I can't say always that if you're a great coder or programmer, yes, you would automatically apply or qualify for approval of an EB-1A. It goes beyond just that. There are a lot of other nuances, but we worked with him to come up with a strategy to show that his talent was really reflected in these areas. We did a lot of work with the recommendation letters. Like I said, we worked with the PR company to get those articles done, and then also put together other criteria in order to meet at least 3 of the 8 or 9 categories in the EB-1A area. I think what was also critical for his approval here, and this is an area that the Trump administration is putting a lot more focus on lately, what's in it for the US? Why should we give this person a green card? How will their talents affect and benefit the US economy. And so I think in this regard, if you're an IT entrepreneur or an IT executive, you're probably better off than the average person, because the US obviously in general puts a high value on the tech sector. It's such an important component of the US economy. So for those reasons, generally, again, it depends on the specifics, but generally I think we can do a better job with showing the impact of this entrepreneur in the US than if somebody were a specialist in, I don't know, basket weaving or something like that. So with the IT sector, we're generally able to focus on that benefit that their work here in the US will create. So I think that was also a critical part of his petition. Just to give you an idea as to the timing as well. Now, I don't want to commit to anything with other clients, how quickly we necessarily could get things done. And this was a client we had been speaking to probably for a year or two before he finally made the decision. But I would say active preparation began in early November of 2025. We filed his case at the end of January, and we got the approval in early February without an RFE. So as you can see, that timeline. Now, I'll have to say to you right now, that was a very relatively compact timeline. He was pushing us, we were pushing him, again, because of this aging out of his child. So I can't say in general, all our cases are done on that expedited of a timeline. I think when you're building up the evidence, sometimes you need more time. But as you can see, it's a relatively short time frame between initial work and getting the approval, especially if there's no RFE. So in that regards, the EB1A is a particularly beneficial category for clients, assuming we can meet the criteria. In any event, as I mentioned, our client was more than overjoyed. They're filing for adjustment of status so they don't have to go back to their home country and then get their green card here as well. So if this sounds like a case that might be similar to your situation, or even if it's not, and you're still looking at an EB1A or perhaps another green card or non-immigrant visa option, please feel free to reach out to us in order to develop a customized and personal strategy for you and your family.